We're going to start at the beginning of the project life cycle and walk all the way through. So at the beginning of the project life cycle, we're going to start at that pre-project stage where people are entering in ideas or proposals for something that may become a project. We have built this intake app on Power Apps. So Erin mentioned that we use the Power Platform for this solution. And as we walk through this pre-configured solution, which we call PPM360, we'll start to look at these different parts. So this first part is all related to intake. And what we're looking at here is the intake gallery. One of the things you'll see in the intake gallery is that this is where you'll find all of the requests that have been submitted so far. So we can scroll down on this list and see that it's quite long. One helpful thing about this list is that we can use these different filters at the top. So if I want to see items where I'm the project sponsor, I can filter that pretty quickly, and that really helps to narrow things down for me. Another thing that people really like to do is filter by request status. So if we think about this life cycle of the intake request, we may be entering in something and then it might go through a couple of approval steps. And during that time, we can track where we are in that approval process by using this request status column. What I'll do next is go ahead and create a new project request. So there's a button included right here. And a little bit of orientation. We can go back over to the gallery if we need to, but essentially to fill out this new request, we're going to work our way through these different tabs that are listed along the top here. What we'll see as we do that is that each tab is going to have different fields displayed on it. One of the things that we'll do is we'll fill out a request, of course, together, but I do want to make sure that you're aware of what are pre-configured or what it means when I say that we have this pre-configured solution. So when we have this pre-configured solution, it means that we do have this setup that's here. But what another part of what that means is that we can go through here and make some updates. Erin mentioned that as part of our process, we typically start with requirements gathering, and that's when we would sit with you and find out which tabs make sense for you and which fields make sense for you in your organization. There are different field types. So we've seen a few here where we can just type in alphanumeric text. Some of these are lookups that will look to people in your organization. The request type is also pretty important. You can imagine that some projects might have different needs. So a marketing campaign might have a different project schedule template and different fields that we collect compared to an IT project. All right. Some of these have different project schedule templates and things like that that are attached with them. So we'll go ahead and choose one of these and see how that appears for us later. Based on this request type, we're going to have a certain project schedule that's already set up for us. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and enter in some of these other values here. And we'll just work our way through the different tabs and start to enter in more information. What's important about this is that some of this information, I thought I was putting other text in there. Some of this information, we can set it up so that it carries over into a request or a project. So once that project gets created, we can see a lot of the same information there. And what we try to do when we're guiding you through the requirements gathering process is think about what information the submitter has at this point in the process, but then also to think about what information is needed for somebody to make an informed decision about whether this should become a project or not. One area that helps with that a lot is the scoring. So here what we have are a list of drivers, a list of items that are important to us as an organization. And for each one of these requests, we can rate how this request measures up. So if we're talking about expanding into new markets and segments, we can rate this particular request to see how it relates to this driver. Okay. For demo purposes, we include this numerical value in all of these just so that we can show how the priority score is calculated. The calculation behind here is different for almost every customer. There's a lot of variation here. A lot of times we also don't show the numbers, but this can be an average. It can be a weighted average based on, what's more important to us. So we can put any calculation behind here to get the priority score. And then finally, the last tab, we have an attachments area. So a lot of times we'll have people that have budget information or something that is a preset document that the organization already uses. And sometimes there might not be anything preset, but there might just be some supplemental information that you want to include. So in that scenario, it's helpful to be able to add an attachment. A lot of times what we'll do is also set this up so that we can create a draft. That way, if you're working on filling out a request and you have to run to a meeting, or if there's a piece of information you need to go back and get, you can save this and it'll save with the status of draft. And that way, when you're ready, you can come back and open it up and then fill in the information. So that's kind of our first step, just filling out the request to begin this new project. The next thing that's going to happen is an approval process. This approval process is also something that looks different for one of our different customers. And in this demo environment that we're looking at today, we have a very simple approval process set up. There's just going to be one approval stage, and I'm going to be the approver for the one that we submitted. There are a couple of different ways that the approval works. What we'll see, what I'll show you in a few minutes, is that I'll have a request for me to approve that comes through over email. I'll also have a version that shows up in Microsoft Teams. So both of those show up simultaneously. And right now I've set this up so that I alone am the approver for this request that we submitted together. In real life, we might have a group of people that are going to approve this, right? And we can define whether an approval action is needed from each person before this can move forward, or maybe just one person in the group. So those are all options that we have. And as Aaron mentioned, using the Power Platform, we're using Power Automate to control the flow here. So that means that we have the ability to add in a tremendous amount of detail about who should be notified, who should be contacted, and how. Let's go ahead and look at this approval step. I'm going to show you my Outlook inbox. So here we see the request for approval. Couple of key things here. One is that there's a link back to this item. As a responsible approver, I would typically go and click on this link to review the entire request. We're not going to do that today though. But also what we have here as an aid is a list of some of the fields from the request with those entries displayed here. So now at a glance, I get an idea of what I'm getting into and what I'm looking at. And this is a choice that you could make as an organization, which fields you would like to show in the email. There are two options here, approve and reject. So this is the email version of things. I also want to show you what this looks like in Microsoft Teams. So I'll bring my Teams window over. And you can see I have an activity alert here. And the activity alert is really this request for me to either approve or reject that request that we submitted together. So there's a place to add in comments. I could reassign this if I need to. And then what I'll do today so we can move forward is go ahead and approve. All right, and then my approvals are all tracked in Teams. So what you can see here is how you're doing. If there are other things that you've approved, those show here. But now I can also notice that there are a couple things that I haven't acted on yet, and the status is still requested. So I could go in and act on those now, but I won't bore you with that. So let's go ahead and change this around. One thing I wanted to show is that now that we have acted on that request, the email request, it changes format slightly. So now I don't have to, go to a meeting and come back and look at this later on in the day and wonder if I've already acted on this or if this is waiting for me still. By the updated look and feel of the email, I can look at this pretty quickly and know that I've already completed this request. So nothing further is needed from me at this point. All right, so we'll come back and look at Teams a little bit later. One of the things that's really important to us is being able to integrate things with Microsoft Teams. But for now, we were able to go through that process and have a project created. So what I'm going to do next is go over to the project portion of things. Notice that this is also built on Power Apps. So we're heavily leveraging that Microsoft Power Platform for these solutions that we're showing today. And now that we've gotten through the request and we actually have a project that's creating, we're going to go ahead and take a look at that. But first, in this project area, we'll see first on this home page that there's a dashboard. And the dashboard is meant to show a roll-up of information across the entire portfolio at a glance. So here, if we're looking at different projects by type, we can pretty quickly see how that distribution looks. We can see projects by state, by overall health, and as we scroll down, you'll see that there are other charts here as well. So it's a great way to be able to see things without necessarily having to go into Power BI. We'll look at Power BI later on, but here at a glance, we can get an idea of how things are. What we're going to be looking at and what we used to build this project platform is Project for the Web. So Erin showed in her slides earlier that there's Planner, which can be used for very basic task tracking, and then Project for the Web can be used if you need to have that task tracking along with a schedule. What we're going to look at here is our pre-configured solution for Project for the Web, which is called PPM360. So this is Project for the Web, but it's also got some additions to it. And those additions are going to help us to have a fully formed project and track things like issues and risks and status report updates. So that's what we're going to look at during this project portion of things. So we can look here at this projects page. I have this pre-filtered so that we're just looking at my active projects, but there are plenty of views you could have here. Each view can have different columns and things like that, but we're going to focus in on these active projects so we can quickly get to that project that we've created together today. So we can see some high-level information. We've got this lovely default so that everything's green. We'll make sure to go in and make some updates and switch that up a little bit. Now we've opened up our project. We've got our transformation webinar that was created based on that intake request that we created and then approved together. Before I jump in and start to make some project updates, I do want to just have a little tiny bit of orientation so we can think about what we're looking at here. There's this menu that shows on the left side that we can use to navigate to different areas. So we started out on the home page a few minutes ago, but now we're looking at projects. We can see our overall portfolios and programs, resource information, and of course we've added our link to reports here as well. And then right below or right at the top here, we've got some options. So if we want to save our progress on this project or save and close, we've got those options at the very top. We see our project name, of course, and then right below that we have our business process flow. Okay, the business process flow is something you may refer to as a project governance workflow, but as we're working on this project and moving through these different stages, we can identify that here. This could be simple where, a field entry is required, and then we just simply click on next stage to move to the next stage. It also could be that this needs an approval in order to move forward. Same type of Power Automate flow that we use to create the project from the intake request is also applied here. And because we're using Power Automate, we can go ahead and put in all types of details about what's required to move from one stage to another, who should approve, and what that approval would look like. All of that can be handled in here. And again, that would be based on your requirements. I'll show this really quickly. I am actually the workflow approver for this. So when I clicked on that option to move to the next stage, this approval step is where we are now. I'm going to go ahead and approve. And we'll get this out of our way. But that's how we move through the workflow. Okay. And then right below this workflow stage, what we'll see are the workflow stages. What we'll see are these different tabs. This is very similar to what we saw earlier when we were looking at that intake app. We had those different tabs. Each tab had different fields on it. So that's what we'll go through next. We've got our summary tab here, and we've got some summary information about the project. We've got the name, the template. So remember when we were creating that intake request, I chose this Six Sigma template here. So that's why it's automatically attached here. And we'll get to see more of that when we get over to the schedule. The project manager is automatically assigned as me, and then I can go ahead and fill in some of these other fields. So remember I mentioned that we like to link our projects with Teams and Planner. I think Erin also mentioned that, this solution here, PPM360, allows you to do a lot of detailed project tracking, okay? And Teams, as we know, is fantastic for collaboration. So we like to join those together and bring together the best of both worlds. What we'll see here is that we have the option to go ahead and fill in all of our project information here, but being able to sync with Teams brings that collaboration aspect into things, which is really helpful. And if we start to move through these different sections, we'll see the project details. We can tie this project with a particular program. We can also tie it to a portfolio. We could do one or the other. In this case, I'm doing both. And then we can enter in some information about our planned start dates. So it's pretty easy and quick to interact with these. And then there's some system information here. So if we wanted to archive this or choose a different calendar template, all those options are here. And as we're working on this project, we'll just go through tab by tab and enter in the different values. Okay. So again, there are different field types on each one of these tabs. So any information that you need to collect, we can. And one of the field types I want to point out while we're here are the calculated field types. So in this case, we can see the active issue number and the active risks, active changes. Those are all going to roll up based on what we enter here for risks, issues, and changes. Okay. As we start to enter those in, this number will increase. Another place where it's popular to have fields that are calculated are with these status fields. So sometimes we have it set so that the schedule is going to be based on actual tasks in your schedule. Okay, we haven't really updated the schedule yet, so we can say that we're green, but let's pretend that we're at risk. Sometimes we also like to do it so that overall health is going to be yellow if any of these are yellow. All right, so we'll pretend that's the case today. For the demo environment, we have these all set up to be manual entry, but in real life, it's not always that. And then at the bottom here, we've got a place for status reports. So right now, this is a brand new project. I don't have any status report entered in yet. So let's go ahead and remedy that. I'm going to enter in a new status report. And it's going to show me a page where I can fill in different fields. So we'll go ahead and put in the date here. Notice that it's asking me for a submitter and then also who I'm submitting this to. One of the options we have is that this status report can be submitted for approval. So what would happen is when I save this, it would get sent over to my manager or whomever I've identified here to view this by email. I'm going to go ahead and save. So I can see this entry here, all of those historical entries as I go through this project week by week or every other week and add in these status updates, they'll all be listed here. So it's a great way. You can always go back in and click there to see that historical information. But also because I submitted this to Neil, Neil's going to get an email with a summary of my status report. So those are all types of things that can be set up. Some people prefer to just handle this in Power BI, so that's possible too. And when we go over to Power BI later on, we'll take a look at how this status report looks. So let's keep going through these different tabs. We've got a financials tab. This is meant for very light financial tracking. We do have a cost tracking application that is much more detailed. So if you're tracking things like purchase orders and invoices or purchase recs even, all of those things can be tracked in our financials tracking app, which is also built using the Power Platform. Resources are listed here as well. So automatically, because I own this project, I'm added to the project team. If you're used to using Project Online, which some of you may be, in Project Online, we need to build a project team and then we can assign resources to tasks. But we don't have that same pressure with Project for the Web. What we're able to do here is we can add in resources if we choose to. There's a new button here so we can build out our project team and talk about what the start and finish date would be, their booked hours, total effort. What I like to do and what I'm going to do today is just go over to the tasks area where we actually schedule our tasks. And as we start to make resource assignments there, those resources will automatically roll over into this resources tab. Now here, we created this project that already has a scheduled template. So this is great. I'm starting out with all these different tasks here. We're going to take a few minutes to talk through the tasks area. One of the most important things about a project is going to be the schedule and making the assignments and things like that. So a lot of times what I see starting out with a template is, it's fantastic. It's a great head start, but sometimes there are things you need to change. There might be tasks that you need to remove, or maybe you need to insert a new task. So all of those options are here. Okay. And then with these tasks, there are other things that you can do like promote or indent so that you're having this type of leveled task structure that we see here. There's this little information area. We'll see that when we're looking at tasks, there are these 4 different views. They all are showing the same information, but from a slightly different perspective. So they're all going to have the same key components. So for example, no matter which one of these views we use, we have the option to show this type of card here where we have more information. And I can choose to update tasks here using the card. We'll assign a task to Erin. All right, and then we can set a start date for this task. We can set a finish date if we want to, the duration. There are buckets, which we'll talk more about in a few minutes. We could set checklist items. So I use these a lot with planner tasks and these tasks here. That way, as I'm working on this, if there is a part 1, which is maybe, request credentials and then receive credentials and then log in, I can track my progress at a more granular level. The effort can go in here, and I can also add dependencies and attachments, which is pretty helpful. I'm going to go ahead and close this. The quick look is showing you some of those task details that you would enter in on the card that I just showed. So the checklist item, we can see that here. And as I complete those checklist items, we could see that the number here is going to increase. Okay. We can also see if there's a note that's attached to some of these tasks. So we can see a few of these have notes. Clicking on the note actually displays the text that's added in here. And then what's great about this project for the web is it's meant to be a lot more flexible than other systems. And part of that flexibility is that we can be as detailed or as simple as we choose to be with our schedules. It could be that we just have a simple task list like this one. And then if we want to add more details, we can go ahead and do that. What I'll do is I'll update some of these assigned to columns. So I'll assign a few to myself. It looks like I didn't assign Erin earlier, so let's give that a try again. And it looks like it doesn't want to assign Erin. Maybe Erin's done something so that she can get out of being assigned to my tasks for today.
I'm hiding.
So I'll go ahead. I'll go ahead and assign myself to a few of these. All right. I'm not going to go too far with that. And then what you can do, the duration's displaying here, and that's part of this template, right? What you can do though is you can add other columns in here. If I click on this add column, we can see some of these other items. So if there are dependencies that I want to view, I can add depends on, or the other option, which is depends after. I can add the bucket here, the percent complete, the effort amount. The start date's usually helpful, so we know when these tasks are scheduled. Notice that some of these dependencies were already added in this system. So we'll go ahead and update some of those, but this is what they look like. With this add column option, you can even create a new field if there's something that you want to capture that's not listed here. So you have a lot of options. You can also filter here. So there are different ways that we can filter. Critical path is here also, so I'll show that more in another view. What I like to do with these tasks is I like to update these different ways based on which view I'm in. So the grid I think is great for typing in new tasks and things like that. Notice at the bottom here, there is an add new task. So I can go ahead and say another new task. And then once I add that task in here, you can kind of move it to the right place. So I'll go ahead and move this one to the top. I could have added this in another way, um, by adding a task right in line where I want it to be, but sometimes it's fun to drag and drop. So next we'll look at the board view. And if you're used to Planner, this will be very familiar. So those different task details that I showed in the grid view where you click on the task and then you get that card information, that's also here. So it's the same information, but another way of looking at it. And what's great about this board view is that you have different ways to group your tasks. So right now we're looking at these based on what's not started. I can add buckets here, but then most importantly, I can group. So that right now these are grouped by bucket. These buckets happen to be part of this template. Okay. With Project for the Web, if I wasn't using a schedule template that was already set up, I would be able to go ahead and define my buckets for this project. And I can still go ahead and, update some of these buckets and do other things like move these around and choose a color for these. So there are all kinds of options that you could use. But for grouping, we can group these by assigned to. This is usually helpful if you're going through things during a meeting and you can say, what Mia's worked on versus what Aaron's worked on, and also maybe make some assignments by dragging and dropping these tasks to different columns. Grouping by progress is also great. So we can go ahead and say this new task is in progress. And let's pick one of these to say that it's completed. So it's really quick and easy to update tasks this way. And this is great from the project manager perspective, but remember that there are also resources on the other end of this that are going to be assigned to these tasks. One of the things that is a barrier sometimes to getting true task updates is that sometimes resources don't want to update their tasks or it's difficult to get to their tasks. What we're going to do, and we'll see this when we go over to Microsoft Teams also, but what we'll see is that this makes it really easy for team members to update tasks that are assigned to them. There are multiple ways that they can get to these tasks that are assigned, and Microsoft is releasing right now, they're rolling out a team member experience. It rolls out in waves, so some people have it, some people don't have it yet. I actually don't have it yet, but it's something that makes it easier for team members to go ahead and update the tasks that are assigned to them on cards like this. So dragging and dropping is great. There's also this little indicator that you can click on at any time to mark something as completed. So again, multiple ways to do the same thing. There are also different groups that we can add in here. There are filters that we can add. So if we just want to focus on what's late, nothing, that's great. And then what's due today, and tomorrow, this week, and that way we can add on and kind of see where we are. And there are different ways to filter these. I want to show next the timeline view. One of the things that is really important when we're scheduling our tasks is entering in those dependencies. And I could have done those in the cards on other areas, but it's really fun to enter in dependencies with Project for the Web because you get this little interface you can interact with. So you can choose your predecessor and link it over with your successor. All right, you've got a couple different ways to do that. We can also update tasks. So once you hover over a task, if you need to increase the duration, you can go ahead and do that. Right? And then if I needed to reschedule something and move it out, I can go ahead and drag and drop. So it's very interactive. Some people don't feel comfortable with this level of interaction, so that's when, you can click on the card and add the dependencies in that way in the grid or the board views. But this is something that's a little bit different and kind of nice to work with. So we can visualize our Gantt here. There are different options. We can zoom. We can also use our filters area to visualize our critical path. So if we select the critical path or select that we want to show the critical path, it's highlighted very distinctly here. All right, and then let's see, we can zoom in and out. That's pretty much what we can do with, most things. We can choose a date to go to. So if I want to go to today's date, I can do that. And then there's also a charts view. This is more kind of statistical information, but it's great to know if we are, having a lot of tasks that are late, right? And seeing how far we are with as far as completion goes. And any of these updates that we make in any of the views are going to show in all of those other views. So now we can see the tasks that I marked as completed, right? We can go ahead and open up some of these cards to see more information. We can see some of the predecessors or the dependencies that I added. So there's a lot here with the schedule that we can do. So it's very flexible, it's fun to interact with, and it's easy because again, you can choose how deeply you go into that schedule. So we came here to talk more about the project, which of course is going to include the schedule, but then there are also other project artifacts we'll need to capture. So the schedule is one thing, but it's also the story behind that schedule, which is where things like risks and issues and changes and decisions come into play. So I want to show you what those look like. These all have a similar appearance in our application. So what we'll see here is first a dashboard. Anything that exists already we'll be able to take a look at. Of course, with a brand new project, we don't have any risks yet. Let's go ahead and add one. Right, and then you'll see the fields that we're going to fill out here. They're pretty straightforward. So we can put a category, we can put a due date on this, the state, whether it's proposed or active. The probability can be entered in here as well. All right, and then a description, a mitigation plan, a contingency plan, and then there's some information that's captured when we add things like this. But what we'll see on that main risks tab is a list of all of the existing risks for this project. These will also roll up into Power BI reports and things like that, but just wanted to give you an idea of how this shows up. Issues is going to be very similar, right? We can add a new issue in here, and as we collect our issues for this project, they'll all display on this main page. I think what I'd like to do is show you an existing project. So give me one moment here. I'll open up a project that actually has a little bit more data for us to look at together. So if we look at issues here, this project already has one. The risks, we have a couple more in here, but I just want to give you an idea of how this looks when we have a couple of items. This is all very similar also to that status page. So here, this project actually has a couple of status updates in it. But changes, anything that changes during the course of a project, we can log here. And what's important is that we're logging information about the change, but in addition to that, we have the ability to log these and have an approval process that it's included with them. So you can see here that this was requested by me and then it can be assigned to somebody. We can have this go through an approval process so that that change is approved, and then we go ahead and update our schedule accordingly. Decisions is going to have something similar, right? So we can see that we've got the approved by column here and the proposed by. We can go ahead and look at one of these and start to see, that we've submitted something, ideally with more detail than this, and then we can see, that this was approved. So we're not just tracking the decision or the change itself, but also that whole approval process. And then with lessons learned, it's always good to be able to track the successes and also the problems that arose during a project. So again, all of this information rolls up into reports, making it pretty valuable. I showed earlier that you can log or tag a project with a portfolio. So the portfolios can be tracked here. We've only got 2 in this demo environment, but if I open up one of the portfolios, we get to see some high-level information, including indicators of the health of the portfolio itself. We get to see some financial information. Notice these are calculated fields, right? So they're rolling up from all of the different projects that are part of this portfolio. And then if we want to see more information about the individual projects, notice that there's a view here. So we can see all of the projects that are part of this portfolio and get an idea of where they are health-wise and see some other roll-up information here. And then programs is going to be very similar. So we only have two programs that are in this demo environment, but again, I could click on the program and start to see more information about the program itself. There is some resource management we can do here. So we could track our resources. You can see some of the resources in our system here. You can track skills that resources have. You can track the different roles that we have as well. And then resource availability, we're mostly going to look at that in Power BI. Speaking of Power BI, let's go ahead and take a look at that right now. So again, Power BI is, part of Microsoft's Power Platform. Because we started out with two different Power Apps, we used the Intake app, which was built on Power Apps. We also looked at our project for the web pre-configured solution PPM360, which is built in Power Apps. We talked about having some Power Automate flows. So because of us using the Power Platform for this solution, it makes it very simple to be able to use Power BI to display all of that information we've collected so far. So now we're looking at everything that we filled in earlier, but from a slightly different perspective. So now, more at the executive level, we're able to see this bird's eye view of the overall portfolio, and we can take a deeper dive. So the PPM 360 reports, the first one that we'll look at is the request dashboard. So those requests that we filled in earlier, remember we started here with this intake gallery and we created a new request together. Let's go back over to Power BI. But what we can see here is a list of those different requests. All right. We can see the type of projects that were being created and some high level information as well. Okay, so the proposed budget, the desired go live, this can be really helpful with planning. For anybody that's not used to Power BI is meant to be an interactive way of looking at your data. So already just looking at this, we can get a pretty good idea. We can see that Neil submitted a lot of these requests. I've submitted a few, but not as many as Neil. We can also get an idea of, how many times Neil was the project sponsor versus other people. But we can also interact with these. So if we want to get more information and see which requests were requested by me, we can go ahead and click on that pie slice, which will filter every bit of the report. So now in this table, I'm seeing only items that were requested by me. And then I can go ahead and click that same pie slice again to unfilter and bring everything back. So that same kind of function happens even if I'm looking at a row in the report or if I'm looking at a visual. There are also filters that we include on the sides. So if I want to take a deeper dive and look at a specific project, I can go ahead and select a project here. So almost all of the information that you see here is available as a filter. These could also be hidden if we need that space. All right, so those are the intake requests displayed in Power BI. If we start to look at our projects, we can look at information at a couple different levels. There's the portfolio level. So this is every project that's entered in. There's the program level report, and then we'll start to see some more project level reports and resource level reports. So this is a quick way, this portfolio health report. It's a quick way to be able to see at a glance where the different projects in our portfolio are health-wise. So anything that needs more attention, perhaps this one that has some critical indicators here, we can use this link that's provided here to go and take a deeper dive and look at that project. Maybe we want to see if, take a look at the risks and issues and see what's happened to cause this. Or it could be something that we capture on the change request list. So that's one way to tackle that. We could also kind of track this throughout some of the other reports to see that information. The portfolio dashboard is going to have a roll-up of general information about projects in this portfolio. So again, I can interact with these if I need to filter the report pages. The portfolio timeline is also valuable for seeing a roll-up of different projects in this portfolio. Let's go ahead to the portfolio milestones. We can see some of the milestones across these different projects. Program health, again, is going to show us those indicators for these different programs. The status reports is something we looked at earlier, right? So we filled out a status report for our project. This type of status update here gets pulled into those Power BI reports. So what we would see here, and I have this pre-filtered for this acquisition target analysis project, but what you're seeing is some of the key information from the project. Some of it comes from the schedule. Some of it comes from the different fields we filled in when we were working on that project. And then some of it comes from that status page where we entered in those narrative values or those narrative text entries. One of the things with Power BI, just for anybody that's not familiar, is that there are different options here for exporting. So if I wanted to share this Power BI report page here, I could go ahead and export this to PDF or to PowerPoint. I can also set up a subscription. So that way this is going to be emailed to me or whomever I choose at whatever um, frequency I select, right? So this could be daily. That's probably pretty often, but I can schedule which time these are all coming out. So there's a lot you can do here. And then remember, even with the status reports, we saw in the project that we can set it up so it's automatically sent by email to a specific person right from the project. With the risks dashboard, we see a roll up of all the different risks. So different ways to look at these. We can see the little um, um, diagram here so we can see the probability versus the impact and get an idea of where we are with the risks that have been logged for our projects. Issues are going to roll up across the portfolio as well. Same with the changes. And when it comes to resources, this is where we get to see a lot of interesting and also helpful information. One of the challenges that a lot of our customers face is that it's time to assign resources to tasks, but we need to figure out who's available to work on those tasks. It's also good to have reports like this because we can see who's working far too much, who's overburdened, and maybe who we're not utilizing enough. So looking at this here, we can see that Neil has plenty going on. I don't have as much, so this would be an indicator that we could move some things from Neil's plate over to mine. And then there are these cards here also, so we get this roll-up information to see how things look overall. We can always click on things to take a deeper dive. And there are different ways to look at the resource assignment information. One of the things that we like to consider here is not just what is assigned, but also the progress with those assignments. Some people might be way ahead progress-wise, and then therefore ready to take on more tasks earlier than others. So those are all important things here. And what we can see, I'll focus in on myself here. I can see some of these different projects that I'm assigned to. And then if I want, I could expand this so that I could look at more specific tasks, right? And then get that information here. So it's really easy with a lot of the things that we've looked at today to start off at kind of a higher level. And then if you choose to go in and look at more details, you have those options. When it comes to resources and availability, a heat map is something we like to include as well. And that way you can quickly tell at a glance, who's overallocated and who isn't. I am trying to keep an eye on the time, and I think we're doing okay. I will make sure that we leave a couple minutes for questions, but before I do that, I absolutely need to show you a few more things in Teams. We had talked earlier about this project um, that we were syncing it over with Teams, right? So we can see here our transformation webinar project has a team that's representing it. So in Teams, there are a couple of things that we'll look at. For anybody that's not really familiar with Teams, Teams has these different teams here. So each one of these listed here is a separate team, and a team is really a collection of people that are working on a common goal. A lot of times that common goal is a project, so that's what we're seeing in this scenario. So everybody on the project team would be part of this team, and each team was created with different channels. So the general channel is what we're seeing here. The general channel is created with each team, and on the general channel, we have different tabs along the top. Posts, files, and wiki come with every general channel. So on the post tab, you can do all kinds of things like interact with your team. So if I want to mention a team, and get everybody's attention, I can go ahead and do that. You can do all kinds of fun things like send little emojis, you can attach documents, you can send really detailed items here, you can send emails to a team or emails to a channel. So there are all kinds of things that you can do like that to collaborate with the team and let them know that maybe you've made an update to a document or something like that. Those documents that you share through this attachment area or through these conversations will automatically get saved to files, as will emails that you send to teams. So files is automatically set to store those. Wiki is also included with every general channel, but the main thing that we add as part of our integration with Teams is this project details section. And when we look at project details, I'm going to go ahead and expand this so that we have a little more space. I like to get as much space as possible to look at, the main thing that I'm focusing on. But here we've opened up this project, which I just realized I didn't save earlier, at least not yet. So what we're seeing here is that same project that we updated earlier. So our business process flow that we see along the top is here, our different tabs with those same entries. So the entries and everything that we see here, we don't need to think about updating this in Teams and updating it in the browser, right? All those updates we made in the browser are visible here in Teams, which is great because we can go ahead and update our schedule here, our risks, issues, everything. One of the things that you can do, if you're already in the browser working on projects, you can go ahead and make those updates in the browser. But if you're already in Teams and talking with people and chatting and you realize you need to make an update, you can do it in Teams too. So there are all kinds of things that you can choose based on your comfort level. When we start to have resources that are assigned to tasks and they want to make their updates, that can be done in Teams as well. There is this task by planner and to do, which I like to use a lot. And here I can see different tasks that were assigned to me across different projects. All right, so I've got quite a long list here. Ignore that some of these are overdue. This is just demo tasks, but some of those will show here, and that's going to help a lot when that team member experience that I talked about gets rolled out to a wider group. All right, so the interaction between or the integration between the project for the web project and Teams is pretty seamless. We didn't really have to do much to make this project create. I actually selected this here in this field, but we had also set it up so that when the project was created, we had already had in the back end something written in the Power Automate flow to automatically create this project. So without having to do a lot, we're able to get a lot of benefits from this and link together our project for the web project with Microsoft Teams. All right, so I know I'm pushing it time-wise, but I want to do a very quick recap of what we've looked at today because there's a lot that we've talked about. But we started out with intake, right? Our Intake 360 part of the app where we entered in a new request. We were able to use a Power Automate flow and choose whether this would be something that becomes a project or not. Once we chose to create a project from that, we were able to go into project for the web. Using our pre-configured solution called PPM360, we were able to go and update that project information. We were also able to update our schedule, add all kinds of tasks, and interact with those in different ways. And then we saw that that information that we collect for the project rolls up into Power BI and is also accessible through Microsoft Teams.